Everyone, on behalf of the Office of Recovery, my name is Micah Joslow, and I'm excited to welcome you all to this webinar on the Small Business Administration's Shuttered Venue Operators Grants Program. With the onset of the pandemic, so many venues throughout Kansas were hit especially hard, which is why the SBA has created the SVOG program to support these important local institutions. Over the course of today's webinar, we will be describing the SBA's Shuttered Venue Operators Grants Program, defining clear action items for next steps to prepare to apply for federal funding when the application opens next week, and finally, clarify additional support available throughout the Recovery Office. Before we get started, I would like to introduce our opening speaker, Lieutenant Governor Toland. David Toland is the 52nd Lieutenant Governor of Kansas and also serves as Secretary of the Kansas Department of Commerce. As Secretary of Commerce, Toland has overseen sweeping changes within the agency. Under his leadership, the department has rebuilt its in-state, domestic, and international business recruitment teams, launched the state's Office of Broadband Development, reestablished a community development division in the Kansas Main Street program, and launched the state's first new economic development strategic planning process since 1986. These efforts and more resulted in more than $2.5 billion in new capital investment by businesses in Kansas in 2020 alone, an increase of nearly 80% over the previous year and the highest in state history. Thank you for being with us today, Lieutenant Governor Toland.
Well, thank you so much, Micah. I really appreciate the invitation, and good afternoon to everybody who's on the call. I'm so grateful to get to join our partners at the SBA and the Kansas Recovery Office to help kick off today's webinar. So we all know COVID has been incredibly hard for our state and its people, but I know that it's been especially hard for everybody who was on the call today. Businesses like movie theaters, venue operators, theatrical producers, live performing arts organizations, museums. And I want you to know Governor Kelly and I admire the resilience of each and every one of you, and we admire your commitment to sticking it out through such a difficult time in our state and our country, and for your respective industries and sectors. I don't know about you, but I know I cannot wait to catch live music, to catch to catch a movie on a Friday night with my family, to get back to normal. And opportunities like what we're talking about today with the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, SVOG, these are the kind of things that are going to help us get back to that normal and enjoying live entertainment again. And so from the very beginning of the pandemic, we recognized, Governor and our whole administration recognized the need to swiftly remove obstacles and to deploy dollars to make sure that we can all come out of the other end of COVID stronger. And we were very proud to work closely and build relationships across state and federal agencies, and with many of you who are on the call today as we work toward this goal. So today's webinar is an example of how all of us are pulling in the same direction, pulling for Kansas businesses. And so if there's one thing I'd like to convey today, it would be that we are here for all of you as you continue to navigate these turbulent waters. We want to be a resource and an ally to you because your success is our success and vice versa. So the grant funding you're going to learn about is going to help you provide tangible, meaningful support as each of your venues begin the process of getting back on your feet and back to a new and we hope better normal. And so again, I want to thank SBA and the Recovery Office for the invitation to speak with all of you this afternoon. And thank you truly for all that you and your venues, your staff do to serve your communities and our state as a whole. We're really grateful for that. And we are so looking forward to walking through your doors again. And so with that, I will turn it back over to the team to walk you through the process and details for the program. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for that, Lieutenant Governor Toland. Next, we're going to hear from two representatives from the Small Business Administration. We're first going to hear from Wayne Bell, who is the District Director of SVA Wichita, and is going to be talking before his colleague, Michael Barrera, who is the District Director of SVA Kansas City District Office, which covers the western 1/3 of the state.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Micah. And welcome, everyone. Really happy to be with you today. I know you guys have been working hard to keep your venues and your businesses operating. And I can only imagine all of the things that you guys have encountered. This program, I think, is going to be a great opportunity to help you down that path of sustainability. But before I get into a few details about what you're going to learn today and hear more about today, I certainly want to express my deep appreciation and thanks to Governor Laura Kelly and her team. Certainly want to thank my friend and colleague, Lieutenant Governor David Toland, as well as the rest of the Kansas Department of Commerce team, and certainly the recovery team. You guys have been amazing, and we deeply appreciate the partnership and collaboration. A few things for those of you who are venue operators, promoters, those of you who are in the performing arts industry. A few things to remember about what you're going to hear today. Number one is that the application portal goes live April the 8th. That's a big deal. Obviously, there have been a lot of information. There's been a lot of information that's been shared. There have been other internal sessions or training sessions for the public that the SBA has had. But again, this is a great opportunity to hear again from our local officials within the state of Kansas, to hear a bit more about resources and ways that you guys can reach out to get help as you apply. I want to also point out something in addition to that go live date of April the 8th, something else to remember. So while the portal is going to be open to everyone, the first priority in those first 14 days is going to be for those venues or entities that experience 90% revenue loss, right? So that group is going to get the first priority in terms of grant awards. The next group, following that first 14 days, the next 14 days will be for those entities that have experienced a 70% revenue loss. And that is, again, going to be that period as compared to 2019 from April 2020 through December 20th. But you'll hear more about those details here in a second. And then afterwards, 28 days after the first, 2 rounds of priority, afterwards, those entities that have experienced a 25% revenue loss when you compare 2020 to 2019. So those are just some things to keep in mind. And the other thing that I want to leave with you before I hand it off to my colleague, Michael Barrera, is for help with the applications. It's critical that you all get familiar with our resource partner network. And I'm talking about the Small Business Development Centers, SCORE, the Women's Business Center over in Overland Park, and various chambers around the state. We've been in close communication with all of these partners, and they should be able to help you answer questions, as you navigate the application. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Michael. It's been my pleasure to be with you. I'm going to be on the line as well, and looking forward to the presentation. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Can you? Okay. Again, I want to also governor as well as the recovery team, because this is a big program that the SBA is going to do. One thing that Wayne says that there's a lot of help out there, and be sure and take advantage of all the help that we have here, small business development centers and the different groups that he mentioned. But I also want to kind of touch on a couple things before you get started, and they're going to go over that in the presentation. Be sure and get your DUNS number, your CAGE number, and you got to have your SAMS number. You can't even apply without those particular criteria. Everyone's got to do it. Another thing that's important to know is go to our landing page. The SBA landing page has almost everything that you need to know after you go over this here today. The landing page has tutorials. It has an application checklist. It also has a frequently asked questions. Those are updated constantly as far as different situations come up. They will put it on there. There's the application itself is on the landing page, and the eligibility criteria for the different groups, whether you're a venue operator, a promoter, a talent agency, a museum, the different criteria that you need will be on that particular page. And it's in the presentation today, but you might want to write this down: sba.gov/S as in Sam, V as in Victor, O as in O, GRANT, and it's also in the presentation today. But be sure you start spend some time with that page. It's going to really help you. And the last thing I probably want to touch upon is that when you fill this information out, it's so important that you put the correct information in, because this is kind of this application is unlike filling out for a loan. If you don't put the right information, you only get one chance. There's no appeal. You don't get a chance to come back and say, can you put this information in there? That's not right now. That's not going to happen. You're going to have to be sure that you're very meticulous on putting that information in that you need to, and then submit before you submit that particular application. There's a lot of information that's going to be coming your way, but just remember those kind of couple of things. And Wayne and I are going to be working together on this because we want Kansas to do well. So I'm looking forward to working with you. And on behalf of Wayne, myself, and the administrator, we wish you the best of luck and go Kansas.
Thank you so much, Michael and Wayne. Next, we're going to hear from Ryan Wills, who is the Hospitality Industry Liaison for the Department of Commerce, before we get started with the content portion of today's session.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. Like Micah said, I am the Hospitality Industry Liaison. I am happy to support this particular grant on behalf of the department. It is events like this, one of the main reasons that my position exists, with the goal of helping get information out to the hospitality industry while also receiving feedback from folks like you on how the Department of Commerce can better assist and cultivate relationships moving forward in the future. So I'm really looking forward to that. I would also say that while this is a federal program, if it weren't for the efforts of fellow Kansans such as Jesse and Adam Hartkey, who we'll be hearing from a little bit later, this grant wouldn't exist. And so I say that because I think one of the best ways to honor all that hard work is to participate in it. I'm hopeful that Kansas will be represented strongly as far as grantee participants go here. So I really encourage anyone listening that's eligible and need, apply for this, spread the word. Knowledge is power during times like these. So if you know other organizations that are eligible and in need, please make sure they're aware of this. Last but not least, on a personal note, I'm also an independent musician. I'm a fan and a strong supporter of all things arts and entertainment. So I have a strong desire to get back out to see shows. And I think we always joke, sometimes folks are paid in exposure. And while that sounds good, what we need and what the whole live event and entertainment industry needs is true support. I'm hopeful that something like this will help as many venues and live event organizations not only survive, but thrive moving forward in the future. And I'm happy to be a part of this and happy to have the Department of Commerce assist however we can. So thanks for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Ryan. So finally, I'm going to introduce our host for the content portion of today's session, Matthew Hansen, who is a Senior Grants Management Specialist at Witt O'Brien's.
Thank you, Micah, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Hansen, and I'm a Senior Grants Management Specialist with the consulting firm Widow Bryans. But more importantly, I'm supporting the State of Kansas Recovery Office, as well as the Kansas Department of Commerce. Micah, you would advance the slide, please. So on Wednesday, March 30th, the Small Business Administration held a webinar that went into great detail about the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program. This webinar was incredibly thorough, an hour and a half in length, and I would encourage all potential applicants to go back and review the material in advance of beginning to develop an application. Because that webinar was so thorough, I will move fairly quickly through today's slides in order to discuss what steps venues can be taking now to be prepared to submit their applications, as well as leave time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. The Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program will provide more than $16 billion in grants to venues and is the first program of its type to specifically target entertainment values and not just provide general business or economic support. Eligible applicants may qualify for up to 45% of their gross earned revenue, up to a maximum single award of $10 million. There are several additional set-asides of funds, including one specifically for small employers, but it is important to remember that this is a competitive grant program, and thus any potential grant award is subject to the availability of funds. This program was established by the Economic Aid to Hard-Hit Small Businesses, Nonprofits, and Venues Act, signed into law on December 27th of last year, and we are fortunate to have two of the individuals responsible for the development of this legislation on the call today. In addition to the items we'll discuss today, I also strongly encourage you to register with the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Application Portal at the link provided on this slide in order to receive up-to-date information from SBA. Next slide. On the slide, you'll see a list of eligible entities for the grant program. This program is unique in that it includes a very diverse group of institutions, as well as the talent representatives that support them. It is important to note that movie theaters have some unique requirements around fixed seating, and that government-owned venues are also eligible to participate. What is equally important to know is who is not eligible. The following circumstances would disqualify a venue from the program: the support companies that service and support venues, those operating outside the jurisdiction of the United States and territories, not being in operation as of February 29th of last year, publicly traded corporations, or a majority owned and controlled by a publicly traded corporation, live performances or sells products or services of a sexual nature. More than 10% of 2019 gross revenue came from the federal government, not including disaster assistance. It owns or operates venues in more than one country, owns or operates venues in more than 10 states, and it had more than 500 employees as of February 29th of last year. There are also additional restrictions for entities owning more than 5 total venues. I realize this was a mouthful, but it is important to familiarize yourself with the specific eligibility requirements for the program before spending a lot of time developing an application only to find out you're not eligible. Please also note that earlier prohibitions on those receiving PPP loans have been removed by the SBA, and now any revenue from a PPP loan received on or after December 27th of last year will simply be removed from your total grant award amount. Next slide. While not an exhaustive list, the Shuttered Venue funding can be used for both employee-focused costs such as payroll, COVID mitigation expenses, and insurance, but also for general operating costs. Examples of these costs would be rent or lease payments, utilities, mortgage and other forms of financing debt, state and local taxes and fees, and other associated expenses. It is important to note that this also includes reimbursing venue owners for money they have already invested in their enterprises during the COVID-19 public health pandemic to keep them financially viable. Recipients of funding from this program will have wide discretion on determining how the funding will be utilized, with the concept of ordinary and necessary being the guiding principle for funding utilization. Per the IRS, an ordinary expense is one that is common and accepted in your trade or business. A necessary expense is one that is helpful and appropriate for your trade or business, and expense does not have to be indispensable to be considered necessary. And the SBA FAQs have a lot of additional information on ordinary and necessary expenses and how to apply them to the grant program. Next slide. As you consider applying for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program, it is important to know that there are several other federal economic recovery programs available to you. Each program has its own unique requirements and application process. The most widely known program is the Payroll Protection Program, or PPP. PPP begins as a loan with the potential for the loan to be forgiven and converted into a straight grant. PPP is valuable in supporting ongoing employee costs, but has limitations, such as not covering contractors. And there have been some enhancements to PPP, some extensions of PPP announced just this week. A lesser known program is the Economic Injury Disaster Loans Program. These loans are not as widely known or available as PPP and cover primarily working capital. SBA actually announced some major enhancements to this program today that will be taking effect next week, specifically increasing the period of economic injury from 6 months to 24 months and increasing loan amounts from $150,000 to $500,000. These enhancements to both PPP and the economic injury loan programs are incredibly helpful and things you should take a look at to support your businesses. Overall, the exciting news is that with the recent changes from SBA, participation in one of the programs does not negatively impact your overall ability to participate in the other programs. And that's key, that you both be able to take advantage of PPP and the Shuttered Venues program to help support your operations. Next slide. While the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program is a competitive grant program that will process applications on a first-come, first-served basis, it does also prioritize those applicants hardest hit economically. During the first 14 days of grant awards, those entities that suffered a 90% or greater revenue loss during the identified period of April of 20 to December of 20, due to the impacts of COVID-19, will be prioritized. During the second 14-day period, venues that suffered a 75% or greater revenue loss during the identified period of April to December due to the impacts of COVID will then be prioritized. The third wave of grant awards, beginning some 28 days after the first awards are made, will prioritize entities that suffered a 25% or greater revenue loss year over year for a specific individual quarter due to the public health crisis. At that point, if funding is still available, SBA will look at additional applications and priority areas for funding. Please note that these are award announcements windows. These are processing windows for SBA and not application periods. So please do not wait to submit your application if you feel like you fall into one of the later priority areas. Get your application in as soon as possible so that you're in the queue when your priority area comes up. Also be aware that once submitted, as was mentioned earlier, the Small Business Administration will not provide you the opportunity to update or make corrections to your application. So please submit your application only once you're fully prepared to and comfortable with the completed product. Some of the reasons why an application might be denied are being incomplete, attempt to commit fraud, not an eligible entity, lacks the required revenue loss, a group of affiliated entities with 5 previous active applications, or the sort of worst case scenario, all of the SBA funding for this program has already been exhausted with other grant awards. Next slide. The application window for this program will open on April 8th. That was exciting that SBA made that announcement several weeks in advance so that people could prepare. One of the reasons for this webinar to be scheduled today is to give applicants as much heads up as possible to be properly prepared for when this application window opens next week. The federal grant process may be new to many of you and seem rather intimidating, but it is a piece of cake compared to what you all do on a day-to-day basis in operating your venues, and in particular, what you've done over the last year to keep your businesses afloat during unprecedented economic times. The hardest part of the federal grants process is the same as it is for completing your annual income taxes, basically gathering the necessary documentation needed to complete the application. Over the next week or so, I would encourage you to start gathering background materials that will be needed, such as employee list, marketing materials, articles of incorporation, etc. For nonprofit applicants, please make sure you also have a copy of your tax exempt status letter. In addition to very general business and operational documents, you will also need to assemble very specific financial records, such as tax returns and payroll statements. Many of these documents you will readily have on hand, but others you will have to request from your accountants, landlords, or other business partners, which could take some time, so you should start working on this soon. Next slide. As Michael mentioned earlier, now for the hard part. It's not really that difficult, but just a little confusing and time intensive. In order to apply for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program, you must have a Data Universal Numbering System, or DUNS number, and you must be registered with the Federal System for Award Management, or SAM.gov. A DUNS number is a unique 9-digit number, similar to a Social Security number for organizations receiving federal assistance. There is no cost to apply for a DUNS number, but it does require 2 forms of acceptable documentation in order to submit. Applicants must show legal and current physical address. Sole proprietors must provide full legal name and current physical address as well. In addition to a DUNS number, you will also have to apply for a Commercial and Government Entity Code System number, or CAGE code. CAGE codes can be applied for separately, but most applicants just complete this process while also registering with SAM.gov. The Small Business Administration recently announced that SAM.gov registration is not a requirement for their restaurant assistance program, but it is still a requirement of the venues program, so please don't delay in working through that process. SAM.gov serves several roles for the federal government, but one of the main roles is to document suspensions or disbarments that might preclude an organization from being eligible to receive federal funding. There is no cost to apply for SAM.gov registration, but you do have to keep your registration updated every 12 months. And just a side note, I've found in the past that applying as a new applicant is actually easier than updating an expired SAM.gov registration. So once you establish it, please don't let it expire, keep it up to date. It's less work in the long run. In addition to DUNS and CAGE codes already discussed, you will also need your TIN, or taxpayer identification number, along with banking information in order to complete your SAM.gov registration. One helpful hint is when you register with SAM.gov, you'll be asked a series of questions. One of the questions is, why are you registering with SAM.gov? You should respond with the following answer. I only want to apply for federal assistance opportunities like grants, loans, and other financial assistance programs. This will be one of the options in the drop-down menu, but there are numerous options in that drop-down menu, and sometimes it gets pretty confusing how to register. So I only want to apply for federal assistance opportunities like grants, loans, and other financial assistance programs. You'll see other options around actually being contractors to the federal government and providing services and those sort of things. Depending on if you're applying for the first time or renewing your registration, you may have to submit information via certified letter. This could delay your ability to submit an application in a timely manner. The entire DUNS and SAM.gov registration process can take as much as 2 weeks, so I strongly encourage you to start this process today if you have not already done so. The good news is once you have completed this process, it is easy to keep current and provides you the opportunity to quickly apply for additional federal financial assistance programs going forward. Next slide. One of the great things about this program is that the Small Business Administration did not create a one-off process or try to reinvent the wheel. The Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program follows an established and predictable federal grant process that many of your professional colleagues and community stakeholders have significant experience with. Once awarded, you will have a direct relationship with the Small Business Administration, so you will not have competing reporting or compliance requirements from various local government or state agencies. While the funding is not being passed through the state, the Recovery Office and Kansas Department of Commerce are here to provide you with ongoing question and answer support as you navigate the application process. Please reach out to the email address provided, kansascovidsupport@ks.gov. That's kansascovidsupport@ks.gov. And the Recovery Office and KDC will leverage their resources and stakeholder relationships to get the necessary answers for you to be successful. As additional information about the program is released, the Recovery Office will also be sponsoring future webinars on various federal financial assistance topics. In the meantime, if there are additional resources you think would be helpful, please also send those ideas to the Recovery Office email. As was previously discussed, the training and technical assistance resources that the Small Business Administration have put in place through their network of local resource partners will be a critical tool as you position your organization to apply for and receive these funds. Because of this, we strongly encourage you to reach out and establish a relationship with those local partners as soon as possible if you do not already have one. Finally, your organizations are vital drivers of economic activity in our local communities and throughout the state of Kansas. So it is our shared goal to help you secure as much of this funding as possible. And with that, I will hand it back over to Micah and be available to answer questions at the end of the session.
Before we start with questions, I'm really excited to introduce to you all our last speaker for today, which, as was implied earlier, are two individuals that played not only a large role in the cultural community here in Kansas, but actually in the process of the creation of the Shuttered Venue Operators Grants program. It's my pleasure to introduce you all to Jesse and Adam Hartke.
Hello, we are Jesse and Adam Hartke. As previously mentioned, we run Hartke Presents out of Wichita, and we are co-owners out at Wave and the Cotillion, and we also book for Riverfest and NASCAR Park here in Wichita.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you to all who have talked already, especially Lieutenant Governor Toland and Governor Kelly. I know she's not on, but y'all played a very integral role, especially at the state level, and showing great support. And through this process, I've gotten to know Wayne Bell really well, and can't say enough great things about him. And recently met Ryan and Micah and Matt and Michael. Nice to meet you as well. You guys are doing great work, and we all appreciate it greatly for sure. It's kind of surreal watching this slideshow. It was just over a year ago that some of us across the country got on a phone call to discuss the recent closures that we were all experiencing. Soon after, we formed a trade organization that didn't exist before, NEVA, National Independent Venue Association. And within a couple months of working with the federal government to figure out, relief for our industry, we had the crazy idea of drafting legislation that would target our industry specifically, and hence the SOS Act, the Save Our Sages Act. As a small group of about 6 to 10 of us that wrote that legislation with Senator Cornyn and Senator Klobuchar, and started working diligently to get it pushed through. We along the way found allies in the movie theaters with NATO, NITO, National Independent Talent Organization, and various other stakeholders, that are benefiting from this. So it's been a wild ride, and we're, very excited that, we're, potentially going to get some much needed funding after over a year of being shut down and revenues losses of over 95%. So.
Yeah, like Adam was saying, it's been a completely insane year. Just over a year ago, most of us on this call as small business owners had, our lifelines ripped out from underneath us completely unexpectedly. I know we were getting ready to set up for a show on March 12th. We were watching our production crew set up, and we got the call that, the city was shutting it down. And nothing's been the same since. I'm so incredibly grateful that our hard work has paid off. And I encourage all of us on this phone call, like was stated earlier, everybody go out and apply for this. This is intended as a lifeline to get us through this. We're going to be closed. We're hoping to reopen the first week of June. And without this, I don't know how we would be able to do that. So please, everybody go out, get your documents in order and apply. We had many businesses that, people we care about in mind as this legislation was being crafted. So it is intended for independent venues and festivals and movie theaters. So this is specifically written for all of us. So please go out and apply.
Yep. And a couple other things, without, support from Department of Commerce and, some of the CARES funding that they allocated to venues and movie theaters here in Kansas, we probably wouldn't be here. So again, thank you for that. And, lastly, I know I can speak for us and the businesses that we're involved in. We're all just, super excited and very cautiously optimistic that we're, seeing an end to this, and hopefully we'll start reopening soon and getting back to work and, doing what we do and attracting new visitors to Kansas and doing shows that draw people down to the town centers or wherever, our spaces are located, and really stimulating the economy after this devastating, catastrophic year. We're rehiring our staff now and gearing up, and I think soon we'll see a reopening, and maybe we can get some of those artists that supported us to come through Kansas, like Dave Grohl and Dolly Parton and Willie Nelson and Mavis Staples and all the folks that gave us so much love and throughout this process, and were huge advocates for us as well. So anyway, yeah, just want to thank y'all, and let's get this going and get back to work.
Thanks so much, Jesse and Adam, and thank you all so much for making this whole process possible. So now I'm going to turn it over to you all to actually ask some questions. If you'd like to ask a question by unmuting your mic, just raise your hand so we can call on you digitally, or please also feel free to ask questions via the chat function, and we will at that point be able to start answering them for you.
Hey, Micah, before you get started, just one quick thing is that if you're going to be looking for assistance, be sure and use the Kansas COVID support group, the SBA landing page, or the partners. I don't mean this to be rude, but Wayne and I cannot help you. As federal employees, we cannot help you in this process. We're prevented from helping you. So don't call our offices. For anything else you need help on, we'll help you out. But on this particular grant thing, we are prohibited from helping folks doing this. So just want to put that in there. Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification, Michael. We really appreciate it. Just to make sure that the whole group has real clear understanding of what all of our roles can be moving forward. So with that, we're all here as a collective group to answer your questions. If you raise your hand or ask a question within the chat box, we'll be here to answer them. I'm going to start with Amy.
Hey there. I have some specific questions about the application. I've gone through the application sample that's been posted on the SBA site. The call this week made it clear that how we budget is going to be incredibly important, as they said that we can only really move that budget around by 10%. When looking at rent payments, so we're a promoter, we go in and rent venues. Is it, do you know if it's going to be preferred that budget amount be put into rent, or that it be included as an operating lease?
Amy, I think we've actually received, you submitted an email with some of these same questions.
I did, yeah.
I think we've actually drafted a response to them, and that should be coming back to you today. But the short answer is the contract or source document should really drive how it's recorded. probably, most likely these would be lease payments, but there is an email response coming back to you.
That's great. Thank you. And then I have one other question that I didn't put in that email. As so many of us are working remotely, it wasn't clear in what way signatures are going to be needed, whether they'll be electronic. Do you have any idea or guidance on that?
I know SBA officials can't specifically respond. I would assume, based on other federal programs right now that are ongoing, that there would be accommodations for electronic signatures.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Matt, we have a few questions in the chat box. The first one comes from Ed. His question is, are fairs and expositions eligible?
I would refer you to the FAQ document. Generally speaking, they are not seasonal sort of temporary events without fixed performance areas or not. There are some accommodations when fairs and carnivals operate venues and facilities year round, but generally speaking, they are not.
Our next question comes from Bart, who asks, do we know whether scanned documents will need to be uploaded as individual pieces? For example, court docs, then IDs, so on and so forth, or will all those docs need to be scanned as a big set of such pieces?
Without registering for the actual application system and getting into it, I can't give you a specific answer. Normally, there is a limited number of upload attachments. So they're likely going to be, you're going to want to scan them into larger chunks, but I don't know how many actual attachments you'll be able to submit in the application.
So if there are any other questions, please be sure to raise your hand or type them into the box. While we wait for other questions to come through, I want to hand it over to Wayne for a moment just to walk us through a few other resources from the SBA that we wanted to make sure we touch upon before we end today.
All right, thanks again, Micah. And as Michael Barrera pointed out, just something to remember on this particular program, Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, SBA team members cannot provide guidance as you navigate the application. So it's imperative that you guys become familiar, if you're not already, with our resource partners, as you've heard multiple times today. If you simply go out to our website at sba.gov, look for the link for local assistance, and you simply plug in either your city or your zip code, and you'll find the resource partners nearest to you that can help. And they're certainly working virtually as well, so you don't have to physically go in. All of their contact information is right there on their landing page, and you can go from there. So we've got a host of resource partners, and if you need any assistance with finding the resource partners, you are welcome to contact the SBA offices. But just remember, you know, this is one program that we can't provide specific guidance to your application questions. We're gonna defer to one of these partners, and we can certainly help you get there if you can't get to them on the website. Next slide, Micah. All right. All right, and just wanted to show you all at a high level the other resources that are available to you. You're probably familiar with the Paycheck Protection Program. That program just got extended until the end of May. It's been a great program, and I suspect at least some of you have applied and perhaps received the Paycheck Protection Program. It was good to learn that now through the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program that there won't be any penalty other than a reduction of your grant after if you've received PPP after December 27th. So that was good. That was a good change that occurred here in recent weeks. Also, for under SBA's normal programming, there's debt relief associated with new loans and for those borrowers that were existing customers of SBA. So in short, SBA is paying principal and interest payments for new loans between now and between now and September 30th. And so, this might be another part of your strategy if you've got an opportunity beyond, your needs here relative to Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. This is something that you probably want to explore because SBA, again, is paying principal and interest on payments anywhere from 3 to 6 months. It just depends on when you apply. And also the economic injury disaster loan, you heard a little bit about that. I suspect many of you have applied for EIDL loans. We have just learned, as you heard earlier in the presentation, and by the way, I thought Matt did a tremendous job. Matt, great job on covering all of the details. And so again, on the EIDL program, now the cap in terms of the amount of loan that you could receive, now that can go beyond $150,000. That cap had been in place for some time. And then of course, now you're learning more about the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, which goes live April the 8th. So all that said, there are great resources at play right now. And if you have any questions relative to those other disaster options, don't hesitate to contact us. Just remember, on Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, we're going to refer you to one of our partners. Thank you. All right, here are ways that you can stay connected to SBA in general. All of these programs have had updates. It's been very fluid, as you could imagine, throughout this period that we've been dealing with the pandemic. There have been a number of legislation changes, first and second rounds of stimulus, that sort of thing. And then there have been policy changes that have directly impacted some of the programs. So if you want to stay current with all of our information, here are ways to do that. I encourage you all, if you're not already subscribers, to go out and subscribe, to our e-blast and those updates. So all of that said, I want to thank again the Kansas Department of Commerce, the Recovery Office. You guys have their contact information, which I believe Micah is going to show on the next slide. All of these resources and these partners have come together, really all about helping our Kansas entities to continue to survive and thrive. And I certainly want to again thank Adam and Jesse Hartke. You guys just, you've done some great work advocating for your peers, your industry, and it's so neat and to just see this come to fruition. And so Adam and Jesse, you guys, you're stars here locally, and so appreciate all of your hard work, and looking forward to helping many that are on the line today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Wayne, and thank you again to Michael, Ryan, Matt, Jesse, and Adam for all you've done to make today's event possible, as well as Lieutenant Governor Toland for starting us off with such an inspiring speech at the beginning. Please do not hesitate to reach out to Kansas COVID support, or rather COVID support at ks.gov if you have any questions or concerns for our broader group. We are going to be staying on the line for the next 10 minutes or so if there are any other questions that come through, but please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. And thank you all for all you're doing on behalf of the people of the great state of Kansas.
Thanks, everyone.
I saw that Jade had a question in the chat. Jade, I am not an SBA employee, nor have I ever worked at SBA. I was with the federal government at the Department of Justice for 14 days, so I can or 14 years, I can give you kind of an illustration of what a normal application review process would look like. So when applications come in, they normally go through what's called a basic minimum review, where federal agency staff look to make sure that all the pieces and parts are there. That if it says there's an attachment, if it says you have to sign here, check this box, they're looking to make sure that it's a complete application before moving it on to the review process. During that basic minimum review, there's not a whole lot of back and forth. You either pass the bar or you don't pass the bar. And with the volume of applications that SBA will receive, you're probably not going to be given a second bite of the apple. Later on in the application and award process, where they're actually negotiating your budget and finalizing your grant agreement, there will be some limited back and forth between you and SBA. You know, this expense is unallowable, or can you provide additional detail on that? So there is a little bit of limited back and forth. But in the beginning, it's a pretty strict, pretty stringent review process, and you either have all the pieces and parts or you don't.
So again, thank you all for being here today. We will be on the line for a few more minutes if you do have any questions, but if you do not have any other questions, please feel free to drop.